Hey everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my Game Week 5 team selection. Finally back from vacation, and we're quickly going to look at my Game Week 4 team. Before we jump into the team selection, I'd love to shout out Fantasy Football Hub. They're a fantastic tool and application that will help increase your rank as an FPL manager. So if you actually want to sort of win your mini leagues and also increase your rank with advanced data, model projections, and things like that, it's been a great tool for me and a really good sort of support system as well in terms of making decisions with sort of objective references to other models. So have a look at Fantasy Football Hub with the link in bio below. They still have a 50% off offer right now up until the end of the month. So have a look at that if you want to. The results weren't great for Game Week 4, as you guys know. It was 53 points in the end, which actually was a red arrow. So we've dropped from around 580 to 670,000 in the world. Ultimately, the issue was just that there were just way too many blanks within my team, with exception to Haaland. Saka and Dunk actually got some points, Bruno as well, but for the most part, a lot of 1-pointers across the board, 2-pointers as well, and a lot of injuries as well within the games. There was a knock on Saka, but he was fine because he ended up playing the Champions League. However, we're starting to see clearly the impacts, I would say, of Odegaard not being within the Arsenal team, and he's been announced to be out for around 8 weeks. I'm not sure if that's the absolute correct estimate. Maybe he comes back sooner, but most sort of authoritative Arsenal sources have mentioned, and even the Norwegian national team sources have mentioned, that the injury is going to be quite long lasting. So I think that has a huge impact on Arsenal attack. However, what we do know of the defense is that it's still as rock solid as it really is. And I clearly don't own it. Arsenal, as I mentioned within my transfer plans video, are on 3 out of 4 clean sheets, which is just, I mean, that's a ridiculous pace. And I don't think that they'll match that clearly over the course of the season. Even last season, with a stellar run of clean sheets, even slight overperformance in defense, they ended up with, I think, 18. So very clearly, you know, we're not expecting rates like this, but they've started out the season with a poor run of games with an astoundingly good return when it comes to clean sheets. And I'm sure when I jump onto Arsenal defense myself, we will not own this run of clean sheets. However, it still shows you that the value that Arsenal does present on defense anyways, in that they're able to sort of perform like this. And hopefully, of course, they continue to do so when we do own, at least to, you know, a respectable degree based on expectations. So that's how I feel about Arsenal defense. Still overperforming, but clearly when the games are better, when I'm planning to wildcard 6, and I'll talk about whether I'm locked in terms of that strategy later on in this video, but they're a very good pick to go for, particularly with the double up with the Martin Odegaard injury, because we're already starting to see, for example, within the Champions League, you're starting to see, let's say, Havertz left center mid, Jesus starting up top in the meantime, whilst Marino is still out, and we need to sort of monitor that situation as well, because maybe if Marino comes back into the team, that gives Havertz a little bit more scope to play at center forward at times, and maybe that's actually better if you want to go for Havertz on a wildcard 6. But for now, I'm a little bit lower on Havertz and definitely a lot higher on double Arsenal defense when I'm looking ahead. As far as the rest of my team, though, you know, Isak, he got subbed off at 45 minutes. We thought there was some sort of broken nose. It turned out to be some sort of eye injury, but it doesn't seem to be that significant. However, Isak's not actually been in training. Some Newcastle sources, and I can't confirm how good they are, have mentioned that he has a minor toe injury, so that's why he missed out on training. It's still very plausible that Isak will start at the end of the week, because ultimately they just don't have enough bodies, and as long as he's reasonably fit by the weekend, and I'm sure we won't get any news from Eddie Howe, because that's Eddie Howe, that he'll play during the weekend, but that's already a significant doubt in my team. In terms of other sort of transfer pass and transfers out, we've got Eze and Bruno as well, who are playing versus each other this week, but ultimately I would say, you know, are fit, are available, and I don't really want to take risks with them. We already know that João Pedro did also miss this game week, and I feel like a lot of people got some really good auto subs. I got Konsa on prospectively a good game. Nothing was delivered there, though. They did concede very quick 2-fire goals from Everton, and looks like I might have Konsa auto subbing on once again this week, particularly with the lack of depth I have in my team. But I don't really see João Pedro necessarily as a transfer out for my own team. For other managers, I completely understand why they might be waiting on João Pedro news, because ultimately João Pedro is someone who was transferred in very often for a lot of managers in Game Week 4 before we found out about this sort of international break knock/injury. The news and the press conference comments from Fabian seem to be very positive, though. It seems like he's already been training, and I'm recording this video on Thursday evening. So it seems like he was able to train the day of the match of the EFL Cup, which was actually on the Wednesday. And it seems like, of course, if he's been able to train for this game, that he's going to be ready for the weekend. So I actually am pretty confident about João Pedro. I will also preface that I do have a decent looking bench for this week, so that's why I'm not that concerned. But for other managers, maybe a future press conference is where you hang your hat on, whether you make that transfer out of João Pedro or not. But that's sort of the state of my team. Trent played 90 minutes, that's great. Lewis was subbed off at 45. Not too concerned because I think he's very firmly first choice. And even if he, let's say, might not start versus Arsenal, which I think we're already starting to see a world where Lewis isn't really specifically impacted by any specific one defender, right? So the comparison to, let's say, Walker at the start of the season, that's not really there because we've seen Lewis play multiple roles. He's effectively really a midfielder for the team. Obviously, in possession, that is, but out of possession, he's still practically starting most games at right back. We've seen the left back iteration of that too so far. But I think going forwards, Guardiola is someone who also should be playing a lot of games. So I'm not really looking forward to, let's say, Lewis as a left back per se, but more so Lewis once again starting at that right back position, which doesn't really conflate with what if, let's say, Walker is to start as a right center back, for example. But that's sort of the team as it stands. Still happy with Dunk. Henderson, look, he's delivered close to nothing, to be quite honest. But I'll also mention that some of the other keepers who have pulled out some ridiculous hauls, like Sanchez's 15-pointer, these are aberrations. And it just reminds me of me owning Pickford last season, where he blanked through some of the easiest games possible and then actually got 7 clean sheets as soon as I wildcarded him out. I think that Crystal Palace are more than likely going to be ending up this season as a top half defense. They've shown nothing so far. I'm sure I'll get rid of Henderson. I'm sure I'll get points in the future, but it's just not to be, apparently, on this sort of run of games. So hoping for something, but probably nothing versus United, and hopefully not versus United, because I'm expecting someone like Bruno to do well once again. And that's just the unfortunate situation with starting with a goalkeeper who actually had a decent run of games, but has delivered nothing. So looking forward to sort of moving on from him and maybe just into someone like David Raya very, very simply. So that's my Game Week 4 review. We ended up with 53 points, as I said, and that's that. Now, moving on to discussing my strategy so far. So what I would say about Game Week 5 is that what I mentioned last week was quite key, where the transfers that I make this week are very indicative of the specific strategy that I want to go for. With players like Isak being quite fragile, with João Pedro having a knock, I actually do really want to commit to a wildcard 6. I think my team is strong. And to be honest, I'm not that concerned about my team going forwards, but I see this as a good opportunity to effectively hit the reset button on my team and take out, structurally some players like Isak without having a huge sort of detrimental impact to my team. And I'd also like to take advantage of what I'm missing out on clearly in Game Week 6, which is, the Salah captaincy, or even arguably, let's say, the Son captaincy. So in order to do so, and also in light of reconsidering Eze's lack of penalty share for now in the short term, Bruno's lack of performances, I'd like to just have the opportunity to effectively dead end in this game week and commit to a wildcard 6. So a lot of the defenders in my team I'm actually quite happy with. When I look at players like Porro, Trent, Lewis, Konsa, Dunk, even actually that defense in of itself, I think is very, very strong. And I don't have many complaints with it. It's just that if I can redistribute the funds going forwards, would I be a bit more comfortable with my team? And I think the answer is probably yes. So when I look at someone like Trent, and even though he's wonderful, I do think, and I have been saying this for quite a while, particularly as a Trent owner myself, that if I can redistribute the 1 million in an appropriate way, I think I would do that. And very clearly, I would say the appropriate way of doing that is simply by going to someone like Gabriel and Raya at the same time, and then actually having a really strong team for the time being. So those are where my thoughts sort of lie right now. And I'm pretty confident that I'm going to commit to such a strategy. So that's really the plan for now, to wildcard 6. And I'll go forward quickly with my suggested transfers here from Fantasy Football Hub. So whilst locking in a wildcard 6, the suggested moves are actually Isak out for Wood and Salah in for Saka. So I do like these moves, and I think the general structure is fine. It's actually very similar to my transfer plan suggested structure, but I have to say I don't really like Wood for this game week. I do think that there's some more value in getting and squeezing out potentially a Dominic Calvert-Lewin start, which seems very likely given that he was sort of managed with illness during the midweek fixture, and Vardy simply, doesn't have any midweek games this week, but will clearly play on the weekend here in Game Week 5. So my thoughts are I'd prefer those two players instinctively, and if we hear any João Pedro news, Welbeck is quite interesting because that means that he's got added pen share as well. So those are sort of where my thoughts lie in terms of the sort of wildcard dead end plans. As I said, I'm committing towards the Game Week 6 wildcard. So we'll go quickly and jump into my sort of preferred moves for this game week for now. So as far as my defense goes, it's pretty stock standard. It's Henderson once again, a home fixture, but he's going to be pitted versus Bruno. So I'm not actually looking forward to him doing well unless he's maybe saving a lot of shots from people that are not named Bruno. In defense, though, I finally get to play Pedro Porro. This time he's got a home fixture versus a Brentford team that have been pretty good in actually getting results on offense. But the key thing here is Wisa's out. So hopefully that's a small little buff to Pedro Porro. And actually looking at defense as well, what I thought would be useful is once again to bring in Rob T's graphic as per usual. Have a follow for Rob T on Twitter. You'll find him on X rather. Basically, the clean sheets this week are very much distributed towards teams like Liverpool, Tottenham, City, Arsenal, Aston Villa. Not exactly great, but so the best clean sheet odds actually belong to Liverpool. And then it's actually pretty close between Aston Villa, Brighton, and Tottenham. Unfortunately, I've actually got defenders from all these teams. I have Konsa first bench though, because I still think that Dunk is someone who actually is still slightly better than, let's say, Konsa as an asset, mostly because he does have attacking threat. We've also seen some of that set piece threat with the direct free kick that he took last week. So that's why I'm going with Dunk. And the same logic applies to Pedro Porro as well, which makes Konsa a very tough but easy bench, I would say, in terms of sort of selecting the order of players that I have. And also, clearly, of course, nothing really to choose between when it comes to the projected goals of Wolves and Nottingham Forest. Nottingham Forest have been playing really well recently, but it's mostly on defense where I think they've looked really, really good. Wolves have also been pretty capable on offense, so I think it's a close decision. I don't have too much regrets of benching Konsa once again. As far as, let's say, City and Arsenal, City clearly have good clean sheet odds too, but I'm not so sure if Rico Lewis is guaranteed to start in this game. He's played quite a fair bit of minutes. Maybe he'll actually play again, and maybe it's actually a mistake of me to not consider Rico Lewis once again, but he does play on the Sunday, which gives him an extra day of rest. I just think that without, let's say, potential leaks over Rico Lewis, and clearly the Arsenal fixture being there, that I don't really want to go for Rico Lewis. Do let me know what your thoughts are on me benching Rico Lewis this week as well. But I think he's going to sit quite comfortably for me as a third bench option, actually, maybe behind someone like Winks, who's actually at home versus an Everton. As far as some of the other data here, that's quite interesting. I would say there's a lot of games where you're not expecting clean sheets, right? Ultimately, Leicester, Everton, these sorts of matches, Crystal Palace, Man United. So ultimately, there's a lot of games where I think we're expecting a lot of attacking dividends and returns, but probably less so in terms of clean sheets. It's not like, your usual big dogs when it comes to defense have good fixtures, with exception to Liverpool now, where I actually own Trent. So I'm pretty happy with this situation. However, when it comes to sort of goal scoring too, you'll see that Liverpool are way high up. And that's part of what makes me want to go for that Salah captaincy more so than, let's say, the Son captaincy too. And I'll talk about captaincy in a moment later when we look at another Rob T graphic that is very, very helpful for supporting some of the decisions this week. As far as expected points too, Salah is very firmly the best captaincy as per Fantasy Football Hub. So have a look at the link in bio as well to have a look at some of the projected points that they have for this week, which I find quite interesting. On top of that, though, what I'd like to mention for my team within the midfield is that I'll be fielding Rodgers, Bruno, Eze, Saka, but Saka replaced with Salah. So effectively, Rodgers is the pick that I think a lot of people have questions over. For me, it's still another home game. I think it's versus another very poor defense. Aston Villa have been scoring plenty of goals. Let's be honest, Rodgers has not been involved in any of them, but has he been close to being involved in them? Certainly he has. Has he been someone who's been playing 95 minutes per game and still clearly has the faith of the manager? Yes. And I just think it's a matter of time before Rodgers actually gets some attacking returns. And if he's ever going to get attacking returns in the short term, it should really be in games like this. over the next two in particular. Wolves at home, Ipswich away are the two best fixtures, I would say, by a country mile. Clearly, of course, we've overcome a great game on game week 4 as well, where he got a lot of XGI but did nothing. But this is sort of the point of why you own certain players, I believe, where if they're continuing to sort of continuously get into good spots, let's say to assist their peers or to actually get maybe good XG, sort of creating opportunities, then of course, hopefully they will actually provide some sort of value. Now, with Rodgers, I think, yes, there have been some other 5.0s who've clearly gotten a lot more points than him, particularly, let's say, Onana or even, let's say, Adama. But I'm not too concerned with, let's say, having to move off of him. And in fact, what I'd probably say about someone like Rodgers is, ultimately, if you're not too satisfied with Rodgers' performance, arguably the 5.0 position in the midfield spot right now isn't for you in FPL. Like, you might as well rather push up in the midfield, I would say, and get some stronger players. Maybe, let's say, Semenyo, which is stretching at 5.6 or 5.7 even. Or you actually move further up as well and get some more nailed players who actually have very consistent avenues of getting returns. So I feel like Onana is a bit of an aberration, and Adama, unfortunately, will have tougher fixtures in the short term. So even though his minutes are really good, I'm not that enthused about going towards a Fulham midfielder. As far as Bruno, look, it's a pretty stock standard average game. Hopefully he can do something. Same with Eze as well. Man United defense have been really poor still, and you know they were saved by the heroics of another Onana last week. But that's not going to really change my thoughts on Eze. Now, it doesn't seem like he's going to have pen share in the immediate future. Maybe he's going to be able to convince Mateta to give him a penalty if he ever gets one anytime soon, but I think it's unlikely. And Salah, as I said, is going to be a very, very standard captaincy option for me. So he is my captaincy for now. In the forward positions, I will be playing Vardy. So we're joining the Vardy party now and going João Pedro and Haaland, with Haaland as my vice captain for this game week. Now, the reason why we're going for Vardy is I think recently his minutes have been really good. He just scored last match. I do find it hard to believe that he'll be an early substitute, even though Edouard's at the team. And I know Edouard can clearly play, but this is a good fixture. Everton still look really poor on defense. Hopefully Vardy can get something within this game. He's on penalties. Good underlying stats so far. And I think people have made a very fair criticism, which is that ultimately he hasn't taken many shots. So I completely understand that sentiment. But I would also say of Vardy, if you compare him to someone like Wood, these are players who are very, very good at getting into really, really good quality positions to actually get at least one strike off of goal. Now, it's not the case that Vardy should be scoring every single shot that he could possibly take. But all I'm saying is that I'm pretty comfortable with owning someone like Vardy for this game week here and actually taking him for a really good fixture for one game week only. I usually like to back the home fixture and the home team. In this case, I'd like to back Vardy over Dominic Calvert-Lewin, but I don't really mind anyone actually going for a Calvert-Lewin instead, or even a Welbeck if, let's say, João Pedro is deemed out. So that's going to be my team. I'm also expecting, as I said at the start of the video, that João Pedro will be willing, or not willing, but actually will be ready to play. And we'll find out hopefully with press conferences, because I don't think that Hurtzler has actually been really deceitful within his press conferences. Maybe a little bit optimistic in terms of injury timelines, because I do remember that Weifer or Weifer, sorry, don't know actually how to pronounce his name quite right now, but I remember when he had an injury during before the international break that he mentioned that Weifer would be coming back very, very shortly. He only sort of featured within the EFL Cup match in the previous game for Brighton. So that was a little bit more delayed compared to what the manager had sort of initially said. But his confirmation that João Pedro's in training does give me confidence, which is why I'm pretty happy to sort of leave my team as it is. This will be a use of 2 free transfers. This will leave me with 0 free transfers after that. But I will be wildcarding and hopefully setting up a team that doesn't need too many transfers after that up until at least game week 8. So that's sort of the plan in the short term, to attack game week 5, get a game week 6 wildcard within the team, move back into, let's say, a triple Arsenal structure, once again, get double Arsenal defense within the team. And that's pretty much it within FPL for me for this week. In terms of captaincy for this game week, I think it's really useful to actually draw on from a great piece of graphic from Rob T once again. So do give him a follow, as I mentioned. But the projected goals and clean sheet odds are very good for Liverpool, as we know. And sort of using that as context and sort of applying that back to Salah, we can see that Salah's projected goals for this week is very, very, very close to touching distance of Haaland, right? So they're 1% apart. You have to take into account that Salah is the more creative player. So when it comes to projecting assists, I would have to imagine that Salah reigns supreme over Haaland. And on top of that, of course, there's a slight chance of better clean sheet odds anyways, right? Which means that Salah will get that additional point. And the fact that Salah, of course, is a midfielder, gets more points for scoring a goal, I'd like to take an easy chance here to go for a Salah captaincy. He's by far, for me, the standard captaincy of this week, or the shout-out captaincy for this week. So I will be going for him as a captain and then Haaland as a vice captain. Now, other people are clearly close, right? Son is actually pretty close to touching distance as well, but still inferior to Salah, in my opinion. And then on top of that, you have other players like Isak, if he's going to start, but it seems like that is in doubt. Solanke's an interesting shout as well. So for managers who are actually looking for a 1 game week punt, potentially, I mean, Solanke was another shout that I mentioned within the transfer plans video. I would definitely have a look to someone like that too. But that's it really for this game week. Thank you guys so much for listening. Let me know what your thoughts are in terms of my team selection. Do you guys think I'd like to go for other moves? Maybe would you prefer that I go for just Saka to Son, which is what I was also planning for if I wanted to roll one of the free transfers? And what are your thoughts in general of Arsenal as a team without Odegaard? That's the sort of key questions that I like to ask you guys, and what your thoughts are. Maybe even jump in and tell me what your thoughts are in terms of other forwards, because I have actually thought about some other forward transfers, like maybe Gakpo. I could squeeze in Gakpo if we get a Gakpo leak, but I also think that his minutes will be very much reduced, and he's a left winger, very clearly under slot. So that's not exactly a huge pro for me, I would say. Just maybe 65, 75 minutes of Gakpo. So those are my thoughts right now for Game Week 5. Take care and goodbye, and I'll see you guys soon.